All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council regular meeting for Monday, December 18th. No study session topics for tonight. I call this meeting to order. If you're able to do so, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council regular meeting for Monday, December 18th. No study session topics for tonight. I call this meeting to order. If you're able to do so, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Present.
Member Newnenkamp.
Present.
Member Prang.
Present.
Member Russell.
Present.
Member Ward.
Present.
Member Wright.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council regular meeting for Monday, December 18th. No study session topics for tonight. I call this meeting to order. If you're able to do so, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
To
Present.
approve the
Member Newnenkamp.
Present.
Member Prang. Present. Member Russell. Present. Member Ward.
Moving on to consideration for the minutes for the seeing none.
Mayor Anderson.
to approve the
Present.
Mayor, get a second.
Member Russell.
Recognition recognized. McDermott on appointment to the Colorado Supreme Court Hearing Board. This board is responsible for hearing cases related to lawyer discipline, disability, unauthorized practice of law, and bar admission cases. Members are selected based on their legal ethics, diverse experience, and commitment to the community. And Ms. McDermott will sit on will sit on a 3-member hearing board and issue decisions on these cases. The involvement of legal professionals in the hearing board ensures that due process is maintained and the public's confidence in the legal system is strengthened. These are 2 essential elements of regulating the legal profession. Congratulations to Vicki McDermott on your appointment. Congratulations. We're now moving on to the introduction of Elizabeth Ramsey, a management fellow here with the city of Englewood. Liz, are you here? Good evening. Liz is originally from Oregon. Liz will soon be graduating with a Master of Public Policy and Administration with a concentration in public management from Colorado State University and holds a Bachelor of Arts in Politics from George Fox University. She recently completed an internship program at the city of Loveland. Management fellow programs are common among local governments used to provide recent graduates with valuable experience. Fellows effectively serve as a project manager, working to proactively advance key projects of an organization. These fellowships generally last for 1 or 2 years. In the city manager's office, Liz will be working on sustainability-related projects in coordination with the sustainability coordinator, including the launch of a sustainability grant program. She'll be assisting the data and analytics manager with developing and implementing a system of tracking performance metrics. She'll be assisting with affordable housing efforts and the city's Tri-Cities homelessness efforts, coordinating recognition at council meetings, and assisting the Public Works Department with process improvements. So please join me in congratulating Liz to the city. Liz, I'm not sure if you have a few words that you want to say for us tonight. I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot now, but welcome to the city of Englewood. Really happy to have you on board and looking forward to some of the improvements that you're looking to make. No, there's a star there. Oh. There you go.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. I'm just super happy to be here and happy to be working with this great team here and working with you all, so thank you.
Liz, we're happy to have you here. Thank you so much. We're now moving on to the recognition of scheduled public comment. The deadline to sign us to speak for scheduled public comment is Wednesday by 5 p.m. prior to the meeting through the city clerk's office. This is an opportunity for the public to address city council. There is an expectation that the presentation will be conducted in a respectful manner. Council may ask questions for clarification, but there will not be any dialogue, and please limit your presentation to 5 minutes. Mayor Pro Tem Joe Anderson will be giving a response to public comment tonight. Up first is Kathleen Bailey, an Englewood resident, to address council. I believe we received an email she was not going to speak tonight, so Moving on next to Kelly McCloskey, an Englewood resident here to address council. Is Kelly online or in person? I don't see Kelly.
I do not have anybody online.
Nope, okay. And then we have Regan Benson here to address council regarding misuse of city resources. Good evening, Ms. Benson. If you could just state your name and your address or cross streets.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you. It really doesn't matter where I live. It really doesn't matter where I live, but thank you very much for pronouncing my name correctly. I really appreciate that. And so I don't have a scripted public comment tonight, so I'm just going to talk about some stuff for 5 minutes. And I want to start with Steve Ward. So your response to me when I left here from my last public comment was disgusting. You're going to be treated with the same amount of respect that you command. So why don't you go ahead and excuse yourself from public comment right now? You don't matter. Do you? You expect to be treated with respect? You expect presentations to be respectful? You better exude that kind of respect. It doesn't matter if I'm a resident or not of Englewood. Do you care to define how many people that you do favors for are residents here in Englewood? Do you care to define how many people you tell that they don't matter, that are on boards, little pet project groups, commissions, whatever you guys want to call them? How many of those people live in Englewood? I'll bet if I spent just as much time online digging through that stuff as I'm digging through other stuff, I'll learn that there are plenty of people involved in the city of Englewood that aren't residents. And I find it a bit troubling that none of you responded to my email communication when I outlined for you why it doesn't matter if I'm a resident or not. Do you not take state and federal dollars? Yes, you do. You take them with open arms and you spend them generously on your friends and your pet projects. So anybody should be able to make public comment at any time in Englewood, whether it be in person or online, and receive the same respect. So I'm glad I could clear that up for you. And I see you're still interested in public comment. I should just turn my back to you, is what I should do. Don't do it again. So I spent some time this week at your Tri-City homeless meeting, and I just want to point one thing out. I mean, there's a million things to point out with this whole effort and where it's going. More importantly, where it's not going, because it's not being thought out with any due diligence for financial sustainability. The bottom line is, you guys you've already spent over $12 million, and you've got not one thing to show for it. Nothing. You haven't even started dealing with the people yet. Where is the rest of the money going to come from? So some simple math, I just want to do some simple math for you. The $12 million that you guys spent, if you take those data points that you so depend on, like your point in time survey, 168 people, do some math on $12 million for 168 people. That's like $74,000 per person. Do you know what $74,000 could have done for 168 people? You could have housed them. And they wouldn't be out there. You could have brought all the money in, just like you did, and housed all those people, and had more than $50,000 per person left for wraparound services. But now you guys are going to spend another year wasting money, and you still aren't even in the business of dealing with the people that you're supposed to be serving. Which, by the way, one of them, I've talked to you about her before. Her name was Shelley. She was going to come meet me here. Yeah, she's still out on the street. Zero help from Arapahoe County in all facets, including Mike Sandgren. Zero. Nothing. I had to take her over into Denver and start the process over. And guess what? Her housing's approved. She's got a voucher. The apartment's vacant. We're not getting a move-in date because Denver Housing Authority has every single thing on hold
Ms. Benson,
for
thank
the
you very much
migrant
for your,
crisis.
thank you for your 5 minutes today, Ms. Benson.
You guys need to think harder and
Any
longer.
questions for Ms. Benson? Ms. Benson, thank you for your time. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councilmember Wright.
Hi, Ms. Benson. You mentioned that you have sent some emails to council.
I have.
I have not received those. Were those prior to December 4th?
They were.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a way that you could re-forward those so that I could receive them?
Yeah, definitely. I can do that.
Okay.
Of course.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, any further questions? No further questions. Ms. Benson, thanks for your time tonight. And with that, concludes scheduled public comment. We're moving to unscheduled public comment. Just
Mayor
for
Sierra,
tonight. I'm sorry.
There's one signed up for 3 minutes.
Yeah,
Oh,
unscheduled public comment. We're moving on to Gary Kozak here to address council. Good evening, Mr.
City
Kozak.
Council.
Go ahead.
Gary Kozak, Oxford and Lipan. I want to welcome the new members of board, and you guys, I'm glad you survived the recall. But I'm here on one other small little issue. I don't know whether you've really been informed or not. The referendum that we filed took in over 1,700 votes. That's signatures. You're disenfranchising them by the fight that you put up when you inadequately, you adequately approved them that we had enough, and then you misappropriated the process. You violated several things on the process, and yes, the courts did turn around and make a claim that it's dropped, but it is not because we were never notified. We have to publicly be notified in writing, and we were never notified. Okay, so now we finally got a letter 3 days ago from the courts, and we have an appeal time, which we will appeal. But remember, 1,700 votes. This was filed, okay, as a class action lawsuit, so each and every person on that lawsuit, each and every person that signed that referendum is a part of this lawsuit. So if I step back out of the way or this goes down, I've got somebody else. If we don't get to go to court, there's all sorts of other people that come in and refile on it. Now, your other thing is, you sit there and say, people are not allowed to be on a board or commission, okay, because of a lawsuit. I'm sorry, but that's not right. That's not on your bylaws, and that's not on your guidelines, okay? We're citizens. We have the rights to come in and apply for a position on a board or commission that you have. I served on several of them when I served on Englewood City Council. Okay? You can try to block all you want, but by law, you have to consider them and their qualifications and what's good for the city of Englewood. All right? And there's been some miscommunication out there, but I'm telling you, if you do that and withdraw an individual from it, remember, out of that 1,700 people that signed that, they're all part of that same issue, and you have board members, you have employees of the city of Englewood that have signed that petition. And if so, you go after one person over here, are you not disqualifying several others that actually signed that and are a part of a class action lawsuit? Think about it very carefully, and the attorney how to advise you properly. And thank you so much, and God bless you. Hope you all have a nice holiday.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kozak, for your time tonight. Any questions for Mr. Kozak? Seeing none, Mr. Kozak, thank you for your time and happy holidays. That concludes unscheduled public comments. Mayor Pro Tem, when you're ready, give a response.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Benson and Mr. Kozak, for coming out and speaking tonight. I want to speak a little bit to Ms. Benson's comments and just put a little context around the expenditures the city made. first of all, city didn't spend $12 million. We didn't have access to those funds. However, I do think the critique that had we had access to spend $12 million, that it would have been a really awesome idea to just house a bunch of people. I think that idea is worthy of consideration. And if somebody does come to city council and says, here's $12 million to spend on homelessness, that would be at the top of my list for discussion. The way this worked out, and it would have been awesome if the 12 million would have been something we could have just decided how to spend. The way this worked out was most of the money came from the ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan Act funds, and we were given these funds by the federal government, as were Littleton and Sheridan and every other city in the country, basically. And our job was to figure out how to best put the money to use. And so we took that money, we said, what can we do with this? Can we use this to move our action plan forward? By the way, one of the ideas behind the action plan was the government isn't always that great at executing services for a variety of things, but for the homeless population particularly. So we said, let's fund some existing programs that have a good track record. That's what we did with a large portion of the money that we invested in homelessness went to Bridge House, which has a really solid track record, and then Cross Purpose also received some of that money, $350,000. Those were two of the places where we said, here are two organizations that have a track record of actually helping people with careers get jobs to get off the street, and we invested in those things. The county, the federal government, as well as private donors came along and filled out the rest of the funds to fund the Bridge House program. We didn't direct those funds. We didn't decide how they would go. And so we ended up, this is what we were doing. We were trying to do the best we could do with the money that we were allowed within the constraints of what we were allowed to do with that money, because those ARPA funds came with strings from the federal government. Is it perfect execution? No, probably not. Had we known that $12 million was going to flow in and we could have just directed that money, could we have done something different with it? I don't know. It's hard to go back and rewind the clock and think about how we should have done things had the situation been presented to us differently. So I'm sensitive to the critique. Had we done something with $74,000 per person, it might have been something different had we had the 12 million up front, but that's just not the way it works out. And it's because government is fundamentally inefficient in many ways, and that's not the way the funding stream works. And so I think what we have put together with the money is really the best case scenario for the way the money came through. We're funding organizations with a solid track record. The action plan, we've hired really, I think, one employee with that money, Mike Sangren. Otherwise, we're funding nonprofits that have a track record of doing this work. And I think that's a positive thing. I think we have the Navigation Center has the chance to get some people off the streets. If we could figure out how to do more sheltering that had a longer time period, I think that would be great. But to me, the job is not done. And, I think we really are. I said this at the Tri-Cities meeting. We're really dependent on the nonprofits, on people who are out volunteering and doing this work already. And I'm just really proud of the work that our community has put into it. And I think that's really the reason these funds have been directed the way they have, is because of the input from many of the nonprofits through Change the Trend that had an input on the Tri-Cities Homelessness Action Plan. So thank you for the critique, and I appreciate it. And hopefully, we'll have the opportunity to do some direct housing kind of things in the future. As we discussed at the Tri-Cities policy meeting, permanent supportive housing, I think, is a big gap in the services provided. Hopefully we'll be able to do that down the road. So, Mr. Kozak, thanks for coming out to speak again. I'm going to refrain for speaking to, any active litigation. So, but do appreciate you taking the time to come out tonight. So with that, I'll pass it back, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem. Any further responses? And with that, we'll move to consent agenda items. So we have 4 items being pulled tonight, 9A, 1, 2, and 3, as well as 9C1. Any other items that we'd like to remove tonight from consent agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve 9B, 1 and 2, 9C, 2, and 3?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Noonan-Camp. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Prang. Can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Noonan-Camp.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Member Wright.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
The record shows 7 ayes.
Thank you. Moving on to 9A1. Member Wright, you had a question for our Director of Utilities, Mr. Wright.
Good evening, Council.
Good evening, Director. Member Wright, are you able to read your question or questions?
Sure.
Yeah, this is the McBroom Ditch Company bylaws, unless you have the questions on you, Director.
I do. If you'd like me to repeat them, I can.
Please.
Okay. So with the McBroom Ditch Company, the agenda item is to amend the bylaws. And there were a couple questions. One was, what percent does Englewood own? And so the ownership of McBroom Ditch is, we are the majority shareholder by a significant amount. The city of Englewood holds 91.67% of the shares. The other, what was that, 8.33% are held by 4 other users or owners of the ditch. And so our total is significant. Those other users are, it says what are the other shareholders? The other users are, shareholders are Elkhorn Investments, who have 1.35%, Genesee Water and Sand District, who has 3.6% ownership, the Herdner family, who has 0.9% ownership, and Mullen High School, who has 2.48% ownership, for a total of 100%.
Go ahead, Member Wright.
Thank you. Learn more and more every day. I did have one more question. If a dollar amount is spent on the Englewood side for the cleanup and stuff when I was reading this, if we exceed a certain dollar amount, does approval have to come to council for that amount? Or if we have to, let's say Mullen High School, have to clean their part, does it have to come for approval to this body?
So the way it would come to approval to this body is if the expenditure falls into this body's approval authority around expenditures. So if it exceeds a certain amount that was originally budgeted and anticipated, that Englewood be helping to fund the McBroom Ditch Company, then that would, if it's exceeding what the normal funding mechanism is of McBroom Ditch Company. McBroom Ditch Company is a separate entity, and the entity is made up of those 5 shareholders. City of Englewood happens to be the majority shareholder. So there's dues that are paid into that company, and proportionally based on shareholders, the shareholder amount, and so that's what funds the ongoing maintenance and operation of that ditch. If there's some kind of a unforeseen expenditure that is greater than what the ditch holder or what the ditch company itself is able to expend, then that's where we potentially come back and say we need to approve more money to help fund some special project.
Any further questions from members of council? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve 9A1?
I put through a motion to approve.
Thank you, Member Wright. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Russell. Any further comments? Seeing none, can we please vote?
Right. Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Noonan-Camp.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Member Wright.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
The record shows 7 ayes.
Thank you so much. Moving on to 9A2. This is the Mile High Flood District IGA. We have Director of Engineering, Deputy Director of Engineering, Tim Host. Member Russell, you have the question from Mr. Host.
Yes, I'm assuming you have the questions too. I'll just ask you all 3 and then you can answer them.
Okay.
When did Cherry Hills Village complete their study on Little Dry Creek floodplain? Why did the city of Englewood not participate with Cherry Hills Village at that time? And then has the city of Englewood approved development that encroached onto and around Little Dry Creek floodplain without checking the previous plan?
I see. I'll take those one at a time. So the first question is, The Cherry Hills Village study is in the final stages of being completed. I think they haven't quite published it. The flood district actually runs those studies and they haven't quite closed it out. But the reason the city didn't participate at that time, from my understanding, was there wasn't enough budget in the stormwater fund to contribute our share to go along with Cherry Hills Village. So the district came back to us about 2 years ago and asked if we wanted to participate. And we, at that time, we'd raised the stormwater rates and we had sufficient budget to be able to participate. So we did go ahead and execute the IGA at that time to get started on the Englewood portion of the study. And then as far as the floodplain development, we do check that on every development there. And the issue we have is that the study we have now is from 1974, so we're regulating to 1974 boundaries and flows and things. So we definitely were very interested in getting that study updated so we can regulate to the most current flows and data we have to make sure the limits of the floodplain are based on the most current methodology and data that we have. So that is the reason to update the study. And for now, we do use the 74 studies, what we have is the latest one.
Is there any reason to believe that the floodplain, there are people now in the floodplain that were not because of changes to the ditch?
At this point, no, there's not anybody that's been incorporated into the floodplain. That this new study that's coming out, it could very well change the boundaries a little bit, so there could be some properties affected. We haven't gotten deep enough into that to know just yet, but that is definitely a possibility. With the new study, you have different flows and the boundaries can change a little bit, so there is a possibility something like that could happen. That's what we'll find out when they finish the study. We'll know for sure what impacts and how that's going to affect existing properties.
And also, is part of the reason we're looking into this because of the problems that we expected down in the Dry Creek Plaza area in June and July, the flooding, and will this study impact? I know there's been some talk about when we redevelop the area down here in City Center of opening the ditch. Does this study include all of those things as well?
It does. So what they're looking at is the size of that box culvert to make sure it'll hold the 100-year flow, because the intention of that box is to hold the 100-year flow. The entire creek, as you know, is in that box now. So the study will tell us if that box can take the flow we need it to take. Otherwise, we have to have alternate plans for overflow going on the surface. So this study is going to tell us quite a lot about that, and it'll help inform us what we need to do to protect people along the creek there.
Okay, and so is it possible that all the flooding that occurred down there precipitated some of this as well?
Actually, the flooding that occurred was because of the grate that was put on the box, and the grate was just the spacing on the bars was too narrow for the amount of debris that was coming down the creek. So that wasn't really flood related. That was more of a maintenance type of issue. The design of that grate just wasn't designed for the maintenance and to handle the amount of debris that was collecting on it. So it really didn't precipitate the study. That was more of the grate was more of a safety thing versus any kind of a flood concern or anything like that.
Okay, so do you know when we enclosed Little Dry Creek? I mean, was it before Cinderella City?
Yeah.
And was that the reason that we enclosed it?
From what I understand, it was enclosed to build the mall. That's what from the history I understand, that was the reason that was all enclosed, so they could make parking in the mall and everything there and have some more land to develop.
Okay, so they're also looking at, will that underground tunnel handle a 100-year flood?
Correct.
Also.
That's the big question from the study, is that tunnel still sized correctly to handle the 100-year flow? And if not, we need to make provisions for any overflow on the surface, and we'll have to examine that. So that's what we're eagerly anticipating the results of this to know for sure if we need to make any surface improvements to handle additional flow.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Any further questions from members of council? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve 9A2?
I move to approve 9A2.
Thank you, Member Russell. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Any further comments? Seeing none, can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Nudenkamp.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Member Wright.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
The record shows 7 ayes.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Up is 9A3. Up again is Director of Utilities Peter Van Rye regarding the Denver Water IGA for Emergency Connects, and I believe you may have the questions already.
Yes, so thank you, Mayor and Council again. So the questions on this one were So there's a statement in the memo that there was a question if this is correct, and the statement is Englewood delivers water to a residential and non-transient population of approximately 57,000 people through 11,322 service lines from the Allen Treatment Plant and its associated water distribution system. And so the question is that seems like a high population amount. The reason that number is 57,000 is because it's two types of population that we serve. One is our residents, which is 33,659. The other are people who come into the city of Englewood to work, whether it be their business, maybe it's the hospitals, some of the industrial services and businesses that we have. Those people come into our service area for more than 4 hours on a daily basis. And so that population amount is estimated at 23,673. So when you add the two of those, you end up at right around 57,000. That 57,000 number is important because when you exceed 50,000, that's when we have to start looking at something that we are looking at, which is called optimal corrosion control. We're doing a study on that. That's all related to lead service lines and lead in drinking water. And so we're well down the path of working with the state to ensure that we're meeting those regulations ahead of schedule. But that population number, the combination of those two, is what triggers that response and why it's written as 57,000 in the memo. Okay. The second question was, are there additional interconnects west of Santa Fe? And there used to be one there. It's been abandoned for many, many years. When we looked at all the interconnects had been abandoned for many, many years. And so we wanted to bring these back online because we think it's a great way to back up our system in case we have some kind of a catastrophic failure. And so we found two locations, one that serves zone 1 and one that serves zone 2. And so these are our pressure zones that we can connect in, that we can make that interconnect with the Denver system and then supply the entire service area. So while there used to be one west of Santa Fe, right now our analysis shows that we don't need it. We don't need it because we can accomplish it with these other two locations. And so we're going to focus on those two locations. And then as we continue to look at the distribution system and the transmission mains for resiliency and vulnerability, we'll look to see if there's maybe a need in the future. But right now, it's not needed.
Perfect. Member Wright, do you have any other further questions?
I do, please.
Go ahead.
So west of Santa Fe, because there's such a hodgepodge of cities there, you've got Sheridan, Denver, Littleton, Englewood. Is there not as great a need of an interconnect so that if we do have a catastrophic issue, my concern is fire. If we have a fire breakout, we could rely on using hydrants from those other cities to supply water to put out a fire if something catastrophic happened. Is that the train of thought?
So the way the water system works, the distribution system, it's like a net. And so there are multiple pipes that feed multiple areas, both east and west and north and south. And so if you have a break in a certain part of the system, unless it's got a single feed to it, which we have a couple of those that we're looking at to improve so that we have, so we minimize any kind of, we can increase resiliency of the system. But for the most part, everything can be fed by multiple different directions. And so that west side of the system is fed by transmission mains that head west in multiple locations, and then that net feeds that whole area. So if we get water introduced into the distribution system from the interconnection point, whether it's on the east side or the west side, it can flow through the net of distribution pipes to get over to the west side to provide that service level. So that's why it's set up that way. Yep.
Any further questions for members of council? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve 983?
Move to approve 983.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Can I get a second?
Second?
Thank you, Member Noonenkamp. Any further comments? Can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Noonenkamp.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Member Wright.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Thank you very much. Moving on to 9C1. This is the presiding judge's salary resolution. We have the municipal court administrator, Ms. Julian, here tonight. Member Ward, you have a question or maybe even a comment, I'm not sure, so.
Yeah, I pulled this just because I do not intend to vote to increase the judge's salary this evening. I do have some concerns with the way the courts are performing. I've shared those in the past, and I feel like they have been incorrectly articulated. So let me, or incorrectly restated. Let me articulate right now one source of concern for me. First of all, we're seeing an environment where year over year, consistently, the number of cases filed to our municipal court is actually declining. And year over year, consistently, the cost of operating the municipal court is increasing. Along with the decrease in caseload comes a decrease in revenue from fines and forfeitures and court costs and other associated things. So we're fighting an uphill battle with a court that has not maintained a lean posture, should I say, or perhaps had some difficulty maintaining a lean posture.
Point of information, is this not question time?
It is question, well, were there any questions, Member Russell? So, Member Ward did pull the item. He's making his case for why he's against the item. So, I'll let him finish, but then we'll open up for questions from members of council. Go ahead, Member Ward.
The second issue that is of concern to me is the reports I've been receiving of very high turnover in court staff. Again, the presiding municipal judge, as I understand it, views himself as the head of the department for staffing purposes. We had some conversation about that in a previous study session, but that's how I understand it. And in any environment, I view high turnover as potentially problematic. So for those two performance indicators that I can name offhand as the head of the department, I am uncomfortable increasing the presiding judge's salary at this time.
Thank you very much, Member Ward. Any questions for members of council? Go ahead, Member Russell.
And this right now isn't for Miss Julian. It is for us. When we pull an item, we're supposed to send an email to you and to the city manager asking questions. There was never a question.
That's correct, Member Russell. There was no question.
Okay, that's problematic.
Yeah. Thank you, Member Russell.
I do have a question. On here, so I guess my question is, the judge, did we do it different this year? Did the judge come earlier to speak with us, or did he not come this year? Generally, he comes to present his case. Did things change?
2 years ago, President, I believe you had.
Your mic's not.
2 years ago, I believe he came and there was presentation and conversation. Last year we were present and there were no questions, there was no conversation. It very much was council decision. He is not here today.
Thank you. That's all I have for right now.
Thank you, Member Russell. Member Prang and then Member Wright.
Yes, I had a question just on the general process as well. How do we get to the 5% recommendation? Is that a recommendation from HR? And then I also would like to address the 5% in terms of comparable cities as far as population size. And the closest to us in the list of requested cities to look at was Westminster. And I think a 3% raise would get us comparable to a same size city of population that needs to be served.
So the survey is conducted annually by HR with that list. The list of cities that are provided by the judge, the position of the judge is provided. So those are comparable cities or comparable courts to what we have, and that's what's reviewed. The issue with this year's is there was, I think, only 3 people or 3 cities actually responded. And so most of the, as you saw from the chart, many of it was carried over from last year. And speaking with HR Director, Mr. Weiss, we would be looking to, if we don't get responses for next year, we would do court requests so that you get accurate information and updated information, because we were relying on that HR courtesy among each other, and we realized we did not get some of that. But time was running out and we needed to present that to you. As far as the 5% to some extent came because the organization has been given a 5% increase, including our line staff. So at all levels have been given the 5%, so judge was not seeking an increase based on some of the lack of information, but felt that the 5% that everyone was receiving would be an adequate request.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Julian. Member Wright?
Hi there. Thank you for being here. I have a couple of questions, please. How many cases in comparison to previous years are now going to a magistrate that were previously handled by the judge that would kind of offset bringing in revenue compared to previous years? And then please forgive me, I don't know the wording where Ames handles the, you know where I'm going, and I don't know the terminology.
Restorative justice, if I may.
Yes, where that is offsetting revenue that would be brought in, where it's, you know, the what is it?
Restorative justice?
Yes, where we're working with people opposed to bringing in revenue. How many cases are being brought in under that umbrella also?
Councilmember Wright, that's a very good point in reference to the restorative justice. We do make a great effort to make sure all of our juvenile cases go in through the restorative justice program, which would obviously decrease revenues. I don't know the exact number. I'm sorry, I didn't bring that information. I didn't know what questions were going to be asked, so I did not bring that with me, but I could happily provide that. But yes, there are cases, especially the majority of our juvenile cases are gone through that process, and we have included adult cases through that as well, so those have been deferred through that process.
Okay, and then can you tell me how many cases you receive are from tickets from our unhoused population that may be handled differently than from our unhoused population?
I could not give specifics. I can tell you that we do have an increased population of transient and homeless, which does impact our revenue because obviously they don't pay. We have collections, we have other recourse, doing community service and those types of things, but we don't have, they're obviously unable to pay, and there are rights that are protected when people are unable to pay.
Okay.
So that is some of it.
Okay.
But I don't have those specific numbers. I could try and determine that, but that's not a metric that we capture. It's probably a metric we should look at in the future.
Okay, so I've asked you for, you know, a couple of different things. Is there any other type of case that the court may see that could impact the revenue generating that the courts may see? I see the courts as dispensing justice, not revenue, but is there anything else that could be impacting the amount of money that would be impacting, you know, the fines and stuff that the courts would be seeing that could be impacting this? Because, you know, there are fines and stuff, but is there anything? I did meet with Chief Watson last week, and he did say because of what's going on at the police station, it's impacted them on writing tickets and stuff that would impact the courts also. It's that trickle-down effect. So is there anything else that is impacting the courts that's impacting, you know, what's going on in the courts that I have not asked a question of?
Sure. First and foremost, courts inevitably, not nationally, not at the federal level, not at the state level, not at the municipal levels, are to be revenue generators. That is not the purpose. As you indicated, they are to provide justice and not be the revenue generators. I think we've been very fortunate, I guess if that's the term you want to use, in reference to Englewood, that it had been a revenue generating court for many, many years. That has been declining for a number of years. It's not just immediate recency. And as you indicated, there is a trickle-down effect in reference to what impacts the police, then impacts the courts. We do have that, you know, population in which that we have transient and homeless that are not able to pay. That does also have impact. Other impacts are with the ACLU and various other legislative impacts. We've talked about OJWs on a number of occasions. We've talked on various other ways that used to allow courts to impose fees and costs that have been eliminated or very limited by the legislature because of the impact and the direction that they see for the rights to protecting the citizens and defendants. And so a lot of those things have limited what the actual income or revenue that generates from each case is. And so again, trying to assist people in getting those services that you all have provided funding for does obviously also offset a revenue in reference to helping people with mental health, substance abuse, and other issues.
Okay, and my last question, what is your attrition rate in the department?
We have had some turnover, obviously, since 2020. We had a major exodus with some of our very skilled and long-term employees that had been here due to COVID that they turned over in recency. We have a 1-year probationary period that we put in place for our staff. It's an organization-wide, it's not just the court. And that gives an opportunity. Courts are very specialized in how they handle cases. It's not somebody that you just bring off the street and you put in, because they have to do a lot of judgment, a lot of critical thinking. When somebody comes to the window and they have a certain situation, not every case is exactly the same and not every outcome is the same. And so therefore we have to have people with special skills and special training, and that takes a long time. I tell people even when we hire them, you won't know it all in a year. There's just no way. And so it takes a lot of time. And so within that year, we've been able to determine people that are good fits and people that are not good fit. And we've had a couple that have been toxic employees that we've actually had to terminate. And so it was within that probationary period. We've had a couple that have voluntarily moved on because it wasn't a good fit for them. We have a very good, solid team at the moment, and we have another that we need to add, and we're being very selective to make sure that we get the right person for that. So while it may look like it's high attrition, it really is within that probationary period of making sure that we have the good fit and that they are a good fit for us and if they choose to leave.
Thank you. Member Anderson, and then Member Noonan-Camp, and then Member Ward.
I just wanted to respond to Member Russell's question regarding the process for pulling things from the consent agenda. I do think there are two reasons to pull something. One would be if there are questions remaining on it, which is commonly the reason. The other possible reason is someone may not have any questions, but may not be able to vote yes. The consent agenda is such a situation where you have to vote yes or no on everything, and so I think that's an appropriate time to to pull something, which I think explains why Member Ward pulled this one this time.
Can I just ask another
Sure, go
question
ahead.
in view of that? I don't disagree with you. I absolutely 100% agree with you. But generally in the process of going through things, there's a question and answer period first, and then there's a statement later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. Member Noonan-Camp.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a couple of questions about what I'm seeing as discrepancies in the council communication, and maybe you can clear it up for me. So for previous council action, it says, on or about December 9th, 2022, council approved a 5% increase for the municipal judge. On the next page, it says that there was a rate change on January 5th of 2%. And then in the actual resolution, it says that on November 21st, council adopted a resolution for an increase, and then it says it was further increased in mid-2023. So I'm seeing 3 different data points there that aren't consistent. Can you speak to that?
I was reflecting on the December date because the council communication was from me, and that's when I recalled us coming back, but I couldn't find it. The resolution is actually drafted by the city attorney's office, and she may have had the exact date, and so it may have been November instead of December in reference to that piece of it. The early the early 2023 number that you're referring to that is not in the council communication but is in the resolution, that was, again, it was an organization-wide increase that was given. So I believe Judge Jefferson was given that as well.
So are you saying it was 2% by council and then an additional 3% mid-year, equaling 5% for the year?
That would have to be from HR. I don't know because I don't see that.
I'm happy to speak to that. City Council adopted two pieces of legislation, one on November 21st, 2022, setting the judge's salary for 2023 effective January 1. Then City Council did a mid-year COLA for all employees, and that was the mid-2023 that increased it to the current salary of $169,957.
No, that's helpful and clarifying, but it still says that on page 1 of the council communication that it was a 5% increase, and on page 2 that it was a 2% increase, which seems inconsistent. And I'm concerned if now we're looking to do a 5% increase if we already did a mid-year adjustment for COLA already this year. I would hate to do 2 COLAs in 1 year for this individual, and it's just not clear that the recommendation is clear at this point to me.
The recommendation would be just to be consistent with what the organization has done previously, and that's based on what we received, the information we received from the HR director in reference to this particular 5% going into effect as of January 2024. And to be honest, I'm not quite understanding because I don't have it. I can't see it, so I'm
This is probably a good reason why the judge should be here. This would be much more efficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Ward, did you have a question?
I have some clarification on some earlier comments, but
Okay.
not necessarily.
Let me see if there's any further questions. Go ahead, Member Russell.
And maybe, I mean, I saw the same thing. So, and the city attorney, maybe you can answer this. So he got the 2% raise, and then later in the year he got 3%. Is that why? That's not right.
No, he got 5% and then he got 2%. So 7% total. So 5% that went into effect January 1, 2022, and then an additional 2% in a budget supplemental. And I can pull up that date if it's relevant.
Okay, so why did he get a 2% raise mid-year?
Yeah, so Member Russell, this was something that we brought forward for all city employees. Because of the delay of our classification and compensation program, we brought forward a supplemental budget request, I believe it was in the spring, to grant all employees a 2% increase. So because of the way the judge's salary is set, we did have to do a resolution specifically for that, but all of our other employees got a 2% increase at that time.
Okay, and so because all of the other employees got a 2% increase at that time, did they also get a 5% increase now when we gave the raises to everybody?
So through the classification and compensation process that we just finished, the vast majority of employees are getting a 5% increase going into next year, yes. There are a few that are, they're basically at the end of their pay band, so there may be a few that are not getting it, but for the most part, most employees are getting the 5%.
Okay, thank you. And so Kenitha, the other question that I have for you, could you talk a little bit about unfunded mandates that the state legislature is putting on the court system? And go ahead and answer that. I may have one other question.
Two that mainly come to mind is the OJWs, which was imposition at the DMV. And I know we've talked about this several times, so I'm sorry for being repetitive, but it was an imposition by the DMV. So when a person went to go renew their driver's license, they are unable to do so due to the fact that the OJWs have been lifted. So in other words, the DMV no longer will require somebody to go resolve their court actions prior to giving them a driver's license. So therefore, that money that used to force people to come and pay for any unpaid tickets or any unpaid fines, that's no longer a remedy. So people can continue to do their license. So basically what happens is those uncollected monies now go to collections. So we have more cases going to collections. Another one is mandatory, with a dismissal, mandatory sealings and sorry, the word is escaping me, but they're mandatory sealings, and that takes a lot of manpower. So when a person's case is deferred or dismissed, we have to do a mandatory sealing with that case. There's a lot of paperwork. We have to notify CBI. CBI then has to seal the case so that it does not happen. Juveniles get an automatic expungement and automatic sealings.
Just a point of information real quick before another question. OJWs, what's the abbreviation stand for?
I forget what the O is. It's judgment something.
Is it outstanding?
Outstanding judgment warrants.
Okay,
That's
perfect.
what it is. Thank you.
Member Russell, you have another question?
It seems like I had another question for you. I can't think of what it was, but this is for city staff. What has been the current turnover rate in city staff and in the police department? Do we have those numbers?
I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but we're glad to make that a council request.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any further questions? I know you have a comment, Member Ward, but can we get a motion to approve and then you can make your comments at that point? So can I get a motion to approve 9C1?
Actually, I would like to ask a question. I think that there is other information out there that if there's a chance this is going to get voted down, then I would like to table this until we get the other information from city staff about how the turnover in city compares with the turnover in the judicial department.
Thank you, Member Russell. It's hard to say whether or not this is going to get voted down or not. I understand where your concern is, though. Member Wright, go ahead.
And to add to Member Russell, I would like to, if we have to get Cora request, to see what other municipal judges are making to do a comparison. I believe, was it Westminster was mentioned? In 2022 was at 175,000, and that was, we're looking at 2 years ago. I would like, if we're going to be at a point where we may need to look at this to see if we're going to be bringing up our municipal judge to, I read somewhere average market is 183, almost 185, 183 is average market. And those are looking at, data from 2001 and, I'm sorry, boy, talk about going back in time, huh? From 2021 and 2022. So we're not even looking at updated current salaries.
Yes.
So that needs to be taken into account also.
Thank you, Member Wright. Member Ward and then Member Noonkemp. Go ahead.
If we're requesting additional information and additional data so that we can make an educated comparison, I think that's a great idea. I would say that the geographic size, populations, and caseloads of these other municipal judges, cities, are also relevant for comparison. We want to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples. So I would like to know how many direct reports each of these presiding municipal judges has, what the caseload of the court that they supervise is, and overall demographic and size information for the cities that they serve, because that information is relevant in making this decision for me as well.
Thank you, Member Ward. Member Noonkemp.
I just wanted to voice support for Member Russell's recommendation that we table. I think just from the questions that we've heard tonight, there's clearly more information that we can have to make it a good decision. And I want to be really clear, the reason why we're taking this so seriously, why we're asking all these questions, is that these are taxpayer dollars. And in our normal system for any kind of change to salaries in the traditional city side of things, there's a very high bar for how we make those decisions, the level of information that we have from HR. And one of these things is not like the others in the sense that I don't have the same level of information. I don't have the same detail around information from HR and our comp and class and where this really fits, as well as how much of this is a comp and class recommendation, how much of this is COLA, how much of this is performance. There's not enough clarity for me to feel like I'm making a good decision with taxpayer resources. So would love to get that information and reconsider.
Thank you, Member Noonkemp. Anyone else?
May I respond?
Yes, please. Go ahead, Court Administrator Julian.
And you may want to check the city attorney on this, but I believe that's part of the process. This process is what's outlined, is the survey, and then evaluating the survey and then making that determination. So if those are changes, I think you'd probably want to talk to the city attorney about that.
Yeah, and I actually think I brought this up last year as well when I said I don't have any information about the judge's performance to make this decision based on, and I think I actually asked last year that I would like more information. I know we had a study session with you all a few months ago, but because we do so many internal reviews on the other side of all of our salary adjustments and we don't do it on this side, it's a little bit harder to make those decisions.
Thank you. Member Wright.
And Member Noonan may have just answered my question. So do we do the same process for all of our high earners within the city? I wasn't part of that process, so do we do all those comparisons for everybody else?
We did do a comp and class study for the city attorney and the city manager, and we did annual reviews that they were evaluated based upon,
Okay,
yes.
perfect. That's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead, Member Russell.
Is it premature to make a motion to table this until we get the information?
No, I think we're at that point at this time,
Okay.
Member Russell, so go ahead.
I would like to make a motion to table the judge's salary until we get the answer to the questions that we've asked. And I mean, that's the motion I want to make. But if we decide we're giving them a raise, I want it to be retroactive to tonight.
Sounds good. Member Russell, so it's date uncertain at this point because with the holidays, we're not sure if we're going to be able to get this information by the 8th, I would assume so. Hopefully. So just motion to table, date uncertain at this point.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Member Russell. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Noonan-Camp. Can we,
Mayor?
any further comments? Go ahead, Member Ward.
I do have some comments. First of all, Ms. Julian, the clarification on turnover was very helpful to me, so thank you for clarifying that. I had not considered that we might involuntarily exit some people from the organization in order to ensure the performance of the court system, so I appreciate that, and being reminded of that is helpful for me as well. Secondly, I just need to make this absolutely, completely crystal clear. I have never, not once ever, nor will I ever say that the courts need to be a profit center for our city. That is not what I am saying when I am noting declined business, declined caseload, and increasing cost of operations, and declining revenue. That is not at all what I'm saying. I'm not saying because this judge isn't making a profit for our city or because these courts aren't making a profit for our city, I don't want to give the judge a raise. What I'm saying is that when I look at a court system that shows ever increasing costs of operations and ever decreasing levels of business being done, and you can do that just by looking at the raw data on the caseloads, that throws a red flag for me. And there's questions to be asked about the size of the organization and the management of the organization associated with that. As the member of this body, or a member of this body, that is responsible for the budget of the courts, it would be woefully irresponsible for me not to ask questions about that trend. So, one last time, and I hope I don't ever hear this from the judicial branch again, but I have never, not ever once, nor will I ever say that the courts need to generate a profit for this city. And I just hope that I never hear anyone ever try to twist my words to mean that ever again. I'm not saying that's what you did tonight, but I have heard that response in the past, and it falls flat for me. It tends to gather wind in the public, so I need to address it as directly as possible tonight.
And I appreciate your comment, Mr. Ward, but I will tell you that that is a national and it is a practice level terminology of revenue generator. So it's not directed at you. It is, there is in many eyes that a court is to have costs or make a profit. And I'm not saying that you said that. I didn't take it that way. But the term revenue generator is a term of art that is used in administrations of courts at all levels, federal, national, and local.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Julian. I think Member Noonan-Camp and then Mayor Pro Tem.
I'll be very brief, just because this is a technical process and I want to be really clear. I agree with Member Russell that we should backdate any raise that we may end up giving, but I just want to make sure it's backdated to Jan 1, not to December 18th. That would be when it would go into effect. Yeah, I thought that's what you did. I just thought, let's be absolutely clear.
Thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we have all the questions, we had a number of questions that kind of floated out there. I heard more detail on the salary comparison, the turnover rate comparison with the rest of the city.
Staff in place.
Yes, sorry, yeah. Were there other?
Caseload.
Caseload.
Reports, case size, overall demo and size.
I'd like to know how much money we have in collections right now.
Okay. Thank you. What? Well, hold on. Anything else, Member Anderson?
No,
Okay.
Yeah, make sure we gather all this.
Yeah, okay, and go ahead, Member Wright.
Can we get a comparison of other courts, maybe our size, of what their revenue influx has been recently? If you're saying it's nationwide, can we see what's happening in other courts also to get a fair comparison? If it's going down everywhere, let's see what that's looking like.
So the list that I have, you want a comparison on those of, as best possible, judge salary, income,
But
revenues,
fees
and-
collected
if
or
it's-
fines collected, I
Yes,
guess, yeah.
please.
If we're seeing a decrease in the fines collected, then our other municipalities also see the same decrease.
Exactly,
Okay.
yes.
Member Noonan-Kemp.
The thing I would add, and this is what I was trying to get at last year as well, is when we make compensation changes with staff that we engage with on a regular basis, it's really easy for us to have a better sense of if they're meeting, their performance standards or not. Because we're not in the court, which I think is all good news for us, we just don't have as much visibility on how the judge is doing. And is there any performance evaluation? I know at different courts there are different unbiased performance metrics from attorneys in the court or from clients in the court. Would be really interested to know, are there upward reviews from staff? We get those for other senior executives within the city, and I think that would be really helpful to have some sort of objective review materials to help inform if a salary increase is appropriate.
We
or
do
not.
have comment cards that people do, and you can always listen in on court. The court is always open. It's a industry or a institution that is open to the public. We are working, again, talk about unfunded mandates. That's another one that we are working on, is which the court will be open. It will be streamed every day, so you can actually tune in and watch and see.
Certainly, and there's obviously, how the judge presides over court, and there's also how one would manage a department and manage staff, and, those are also really important metrics for how we consider compensation. So anything around how the department's doing would be really helpful.
Thank you. Member Russell.
And just another comment for the city council, because I'm just wondering, the questions that we're asking, I'm not saying there's not problems, but the problems may not be there. They could be someplace else in the system, and that needs to be looked at also.
Yep, agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. All right, Member Pring.
Sorry. I just want to make sure, so the list of cities that we're comparing numbers to for salary, according to what I saw today, only one of those was comparable in population size to us. Are you saying that the rest of the cities, like court size, they're comparable? Why are we using Denver, for example, as one of our examples?
They're comparable in different ways, types of cases. That's a lot of times it's types of cases, population, or the number of cases and different things within that. I think Denver had been one that's just been on the list for a very long time because it is very different. Denver is much different. Their city court, their municipal court is much different. So I don't know the historical. That's just most of that has been a list that's been used for many years.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see cities presented that have like the most similarity with types of court cases, population size, et cetera, versus looking at numbers that really are meaningless in my examination of whether I would vote in favor or not.
When I do that justification, I'll make sure I indicate why they would be in that comparison.
Okay, thank you.
Member Russell.
And I want to make a comment because I think it's going to be difficult for us to find, population-wise, we can find cities that are similar in size, but may not have the same problems that we have. I think homelessness is a huge issue there, and some of these other cities, if they're farther out, may be similar in size, but they may not have some of the problems that we have inherent with crime, too. So,
Yeah.
all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. Yeah, I think it's going to be very hard to get apples to apples on this one, but we'll come as close as possible. And with that, the motion on the table is a motion to table to, it's a good thing, it's a date uncertain, so a lot of information. And with that, can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Noonan-Camp.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Member Wright.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes to table.
Court Administrator Julian, thank you very much for your time tonight. Thanks for answering all our questions. And
Thank you. I do have one follow-up
Yes,
question.
please.
Since it was tabled to a date uncertain, am I to reschedule this, or would I be notified of when?
Well,
you want this to be conducted, or after I compile the information?
I was going to say, once we compile the information, because there's going to be court requests around the holidays, I'm not sure how how likely you are to get those, within that time frame. But yes, if you could just reach out back to us when you have the information, I think we could schedule on the agenda.
Sounds good. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for your time.
Happy holidays. Thank you. Are we good to continue moving? All right, there's no public hearings tonight. We're moving on to 11C1. This is the contract for services with Centris CMP for the purchase, installation, support, and startup services of a dewatering centrifuge. We have Director of Utilities, Peter Van Rye, that wants to tell us all about it.
I'm excited to tell you about this one.
Go ahead, Director.
I'm going to try and pull up my thing here. I'm hitting the button. Okay, these are my slide decks that were for consent agenda items if necessary. So
yeah, keep going. Yep.
Get through those.
Next.
I have 3 decks that would be in there in case there were consent items.
I know you could talk about it through memory, right, Director?
I could.
You could.
Okay, so I'm here tonight to present an item for purchase, which is a new centrifuge. So this is to help us with our solids handling systems at the Allen Water Treatment Plant. So as we've talked about in the past and in the last couple years, we have addressed some of the solids that are in the South Reservoir. The South Reservoir is essentially where the treatment plant, during the treatment process, we take solids out of the waters, like silt and contaminants and things like that. They become coagulated, and then they get sent to the South Reservoir where they're stored in that reservoir with water and then solids. Well, we've been pumping solids into that thing for decades and not pulling it out at the same rate that we've been pumping it in. So that South Reservoir is well past its current volume. It's exceeded its volume as originally designed. The solids have actually pushed over a curtain wall that's there, so that's supposed to separate the solid side of the reservoir from the clean side of the reservoir, but that's pushed that over. So a few years ago, we contracted with a contractor to pull solids out of the South Reservoir to gain us some volume so that we could implement a longer term solution. Currently today what we have a belt filter press that's been there for decades. It is actually the second use of that belt filter press. It actually used to be a fruit press, and the city bought it many years ago, repurposed it as a solids press, and so it does the same thing essentially. Instead of pressing juice out of fruit, it presses water out of the solids to get them to a drier state so that we can then let them air dry outside and then ultimately haul them off. In the last 2 years, we hired a contractor to help us catch up for the delay that belt filter press has instituted, because essentially what happens is we put more solids in, then the belt filter press can take out, and the belt filter press is pretty old. Our long-term solution is what we're bringing here tonight, and it's not the raw water system. It is the centrifuge, and the centrifuge is are we on a, I'm sorry, are we on a?
We're still on the wrong one. We're not
okay.
there yet.
It was just, okay. I'm sorry if I'm a little bit thrown off a little bit. Hey, there we go. There's my slide deck. Okay. Let's see how much I got right. Okay, can we advance the next slide? Okay, so solids overview. So essentially what I talked about, solids are taken out of the system, sent to the South Reservoir. Belt filter press squeezes the water out of it, and then we dry it in the drying beds, and then we ultimately haul it off. Next slide. So what we want to do is we want to modernize that system. We want to modernize it with a centrifuge as opposed to a belt filter press. So we contracted with Hazen and Sawyer in 2023. We did a mass balance analysis to determine what our annual loading is, and what we found was that we're putting in about 300 tons a year, and we pull out somewhere around 200 or 180. So we have this net increase that goes up by about 120 per year. What we worked with Hazen to do, and this was through one of the on-calls, was to put together specifications for a centrifuge purchase and a system modifications to the dewatering building. We expect to move forward with that actual contract in March of 2024, which will allow us to reduce our reliance on an outside contractor to come in and pull those solids. So that's what we've done for the past 2 years to buy us some time so we can put in a longer term solution. We will still continue to hire with or contract with a hauling contractor annually, but this is the actual pulling of the solids out of the south reservoir. Next slide. So centrifuges have a really long lead time. Right now, if we order this today, it takes more than a year to get it. They're very complex pieces of equipment. Essentially, what they do is they spin really fast. They spin the water out, and then the solids are then sent out where we dry them in the back of the solids handling building. It does increase our capacity significantly from what a belt filter press would typically allow for in terms of production rate. And Hazen will also provide us the installation support and training for our O&M, since it is a new system that's different than our system that we have today. Next slide. So we went through a process to select a vendor on this. We issued an RFP in September. We had 3 proposals submitted. The selection committee reviewed those. Ultimately, it landed on the Centrisis system. There's a few reasons. That the Centrisis system actually has the smallest footprint, which actually fits in the building best. And so we need to do the least amount of building modifications to put that centrifuge in our existing solids handling building. It also allows us to program it independently from their predefined programming. So we have a lot more ability to customize the programming of how we run it and integrate that into our overall wastewater or water treatment plant operations programming. And then from a service perspective, we get excellent service from them. These Centrisis is also the centrifuges that are used at SPR and have been in place for more than 2 decades. And we have 3 of them over there, and they just spin and spin and spin. We spin water out of biosolids there. And so we have familiarity with Centrisis as a system that the city has used for several years. And so ultimately, because of those reasons, the selection committee landed on Centrisis as the best fit for our system and what we would like to install into the solids handling building. The contract authorization for the purchase is $680,000. We would propose to add a 10% staff managed contingency for a total project authorization of $748,000. We presented this to the Water and Sewer Board last week, and they provided recommendation to approve.
Thank you very much, Director. Any questions for members of council? Go ahead, Member Russell.
This may not totally fit in here, but you kept saying the South Pond. So what do we use the North Pond for, and how does this work into the system?
So the South Pond is where the solids out of the treatment plant process are deposited, and then they settle out in the South Pond, and then that water decants to the North Pond. The North Pond will either get water from that South Pond because we send a lot of water with the solids, and so we need that water, process water, to continue through the system. And right now that discharges into the North Pond. Additionally, we have the ability to send water from Union Avenue or City Ditch into the North Pond. And essentially what North Pond is, it's not really a pond, it's a process control system that helps us regulate the flow into the plant. So it's like a wide spot in the pipe. And so what that does is it allows us to maintain a more consistent flow into the plant because it can fluctuate up and down in terms of its level and allow us to maintain a much more consistent flow into the plant itself. Now, there are multiple different configurations of how we use the North Pond, whether we use it in conjunction with City Ditch or Union Ave, but ultimately right now the South Pond water ends up going to the North Pond. We actually think that this is what we're discovering is the amount of water that's going from the south pond to the north pond, we believe is actually contributing to some of our taste and odor issues because of the fact there's so many solids in the south pond that have not been removed. So we think that this is not the only reason, but is a reason that's contributing to that decline in taste and odor issues with the water over the last 10, 20 years.
So the the water that goes from the south pond to the north pond, is there solids that go with it? I mean, so are we having a problem with solids in the north pond also?
Yeah, so if there's solids in the north pond, essentially what happens is they just get retreated out again. And so yes, we want to limit the amount that end up in the north pond because then we're just duplicating treatment process. What's supposed to prevent that is that curtain wall. And so if you think about if you're looking at a cross section of the pond, there's a curtain wall that divides the south pond in half. Right now that curtain wall is supposed to be vertical. Right now it's kicked way out because there's been so many solids put in that it's pushed it out into this clear area of the pond, and it's impacting that clear area, which is causing us a closed circuit loop of pulling the solids out, depositing them in that solid side of the pond, but having it spill into the clear side, which then decants to the north pond, and then it just becomes this vicious cycle because it hasn't been maintained, it hasn't been properly the solids haven't been properly removed over the course of the past couple decades.
So basically the the solids really are like silt that comes from the river, right? I mean, it's
silt, it's silt and contaminants that we can either can remove by through chemical processes or through coagulation processes. So you might really get really fine particles. If you've gone through the water plant, there's that part of the process where a lot of particulate will float and it won't sink, but it also won't go all the way to the top. And so we have a process that causes that they hit these plates and then it drops to the ground or drops to the bottom where we then pull them out. So really what's in there is everything to that microscopic level of contaminants that we can pull out through the processes that we have. That's what ends up in the south.
okay. I appreciate that. And I mean, for council members that haven't toured the plant, the water treatment plant, you should do that because it's pretty interesting. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And if you have toured and would like to come again, we'd love to have you.
Thank you, Member Russell. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Director Van Wright. The question I have, just clarifying the process a little bit. So the solids, where it hits those plates and goes out, that drops to the bottom. That material that drops to the bottom, along with some of the water, is then pumped into the south pond? Is that where that goes next?
Yeah, so essentially what happens is that solids gets down to the bottom, it's cleared out, it's raked out, and then it's sucked out. As well as like backwashes of the filters, those types of solids. So there's really small. It's the majority of it is water because it's got to carry the solids to the pond, and then the pond is the area where those solids will settle out, and then whatever remaining water is there is what we then circulate back through. The centrifuge, the belt press, and then the centrifuge then takes those solids that are dredged out of the pond, and then that water is then pressed out. Because when you move solids, you have to move them in a slurry, and that slurry is a really low percent of solids and a really high percent of water.
So the water that's going into the south pond is then, after it's been settled out, it's then going back into the north pond, and
so then it goes back into the north pond, and then it gets recycled.
But it's that water that you think potentially contributes a portion of the taste and odor?
We think that's part of it.
Is it possible to just dump that water back in the South Platte and get a credit on that water? Is that?
It's actually something that we're looking at. Exactly that. We're looking at potentially seeing if it is okay for us to discharge that directly to Big Dry Creek, which is right there.
Yeah.
So that's potential process change that we're looking at. to, again, we're looking at all aspects of things that we think are contributing to taste, odor, and hardness. I haven't gotten word back that that's an approved approach yet, but if it's something that we can do, it's something that we're definitely looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Member Prang?
Hi, I apologize in advance because this is way beyond my normal level of understanding. But so I understand that we're wanting to modernize our system, and the purchase of this equipment is also to address the extra solids that we have built up over years, correct?
Yeah, it's three things. So one is modernization of an equipment piece it's really past its useful life, and finding parts for it is hard. Second is increasing the production rate. So it's a system that we can exceed the removal. The amount that we remove exceeds the amount that we put in. So it flips that from being constantly accumulating in the South Pond to actually pulling it down. And then the last step of this is to clear the pond back out to the point where it becomes this balanced system where solids go in and then solids are dredged out. Not that it builds up for so long to the point where if you walk on the west edge of the South Pond, the depth of the water is probably only 18 inches because the remainder of the pond is full of solids all the way across half the pond. So we want to get that pulled down and reestablish the reservoir volume and establish that process so there's a balance to it.
Okay. So in light of that, your average norm of dry solids is 300 tons,
Right.
correct? So it looks like we have 8 years worth of buildup of dry solids that we're trying to disperse. And I'm just wondering about the potential impact of the lifespan of this centrifuge that we're purchasing. Like, is there going to be a lot of wear and tear as we're trying to get rid of all of this extra dry solid that's built up over the years to get us to the optimal level of annual solids?
I don't think it would be anything less than what would be expected for a piece of equipment like this. Like I said earlier on, we have 3 of these centrifuges at South Platte that have been running for, I believe, around 2 decades. And so the volume of solids that come through that plant is actually a greater degree of solids volume than what the Allen plant has, because part of wastewater treatment is dealing with the solids. It's one of the main generations off the wastewater system. Those centrifuges have been running, day in and day out for 2 decades. So the loading that we anticipate from this system, we believe the centrifuge will be more than equipped to handle that for 2 decades at least, and be such that it's a much simpler system in terms of its mechanical nature. I mean, it's not simple, but it's more simple than a belt filter press that has all kinds of gears and valves and gears and pulleys and things like that. And so that we think that actually is a more stable system, and the production rate, it's just easier to run too.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Any further questions for members of council? Go ahead, Member Ward.
Is this like a catalog purchase? Like they make these items? Is it like a standard piece of equipment, or did we order it custom built?
No, this would be they make a lot of these, so we would be looking at a model that they have as part of their offering. It's not like a custom system to us. It's a model that we believe fits our specifications, but fits our need based on what we've identified in those specifications. So there might be some slight modifications or customizations, but typically this is designed to be more off-the-shelf equipment that we could then purchase and install. It just takes forever to. It's a long lead time because they essentially don't stick them on a shelf. They have to once you order them, they have to build them.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Member Wright.
Did we do a major dredging a couple of years ago to clean everything out, and it had to be hauled off and it was found non-radioactive or something like that? Is that the same area that we're talking about?
Yeah, there's a couple things in there. So we did 2 outside dredging contracts last year and the year before. The first year, I believe that was a $200,000 contract, and we dredged around 200 tons. And keep in mind, there's 2,500 tons in there. Last year, that was a $400,000 contract. We believe we got 500 tons removed. And so if we could keep doing this with contractors, we estimate that it would cost in excess of $2 or $3 million, and at the end, we'd still not have the system. So the strategy was to hire a contractor for the first couple of years to buy us some volume, essentially. So pull it down so we can have some time to then install this as a permanent solution. This is the same system that the contractor uses. So the contractor just has it mounted on a tractor trailer, and then the dredge pulls the solids out and then spins it out and then puts it in our drying beds. The drying beds themselves are in and around the solids handling building, and what we typically do is when we have enough solids that have been drying for 30 or 45 days, we'll call the contractor up, and they'll do a day of trucking, and they'll haul them off site and just dispose of them in a landfill. They don't need to go to a specialized hazardous waste landfill. We test them every year. Part of the reasoning, I think part of where your question is what's called technologically enhanced naturally occurring radioactive material. So that's basically what's in silts in Colorado. It's that low level radiation that occurs when you consolidate that type of runoff, that silt runoff. That a few years ago, the regs on those were more strict. Those regs have relaxed, which allow us to dispose of the solids in a regular landfill. But we do have to test them to ensure that we still are under those levels.
So is it yearly testing, or every time you go to that every 30 to 40 days you go to have them hauled off, they have to be tested?
Right now we test them annually.
Okay. All right. So that 18 inches of water you were talking about with this equipment, we would have more than 18 inches of water because it'd be constantly dredged then.
Yeah, it'd be closer to 18 feet.
Oh.
I mean, there's that much solids in it. It's not a couple feet. It's 20 feet deep.
Ick.
Yes, a lot.
Thank you.
All right. Any further questions? Now, can I get a motion to approve 11C1?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Ward. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Any further comments? Can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Nunekamp.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Member Wright.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Thank you very much, Director.
Thank you, and let me apologize for the technical difficulties at the beginning. I apologize for not being able to go completely off the cuff on that one. So it's good to have my PowerPoint.
You came close, though. Thank you, Director. Happy
Appreciate it.
holidays.
You too.
Moving on to 11C2, we got Deputy Director Tim House here to talk about the award of contract to Felsberg, Holt, and Nulveg for the design of the old Hampton Complete Streets.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the introduction. I'll got a brief PowerPoint presentation here, and then I'll answer any questions you have on this item. Is the clicker thing working tonight or not? Doesn't let us advance. Uh-oh. Just give me a
No, I think we're going to ask it's the next one. No, it's the next one. There we go.
There we are. I should go to the next slide there. We'll go over the purpose of the project. Does the mouse work too? Right, so let's go back to the last slide there. So the purpose of this project here, this is a complete streets project, which is essentially what we're trying to do is make the corridor more friendly for bikes and pedestrians to travel through it. So this particular project is on Old Hamden between Lafayette and Broadway. So the idea is to be able to make a wider sidewalk and a bicycle area for bikes to travel down the road and not have to merge with the cars quite so much. So we're also looking at making ADA improvements to make it easier for people with disabilities to get through the corridor, as well as introducing some landscaping and different aesthetic things for environmental stormwater runoff and trying to keep the storm a little bit cleaner. So otherwise it's the corridor there is the a little bit longer than the utility corridor. This is actually the project that follows up the utilities that we're trying to replace between basically Lincoln or Clarkson and Broadway. That there's some utility work we're planning to do before this project comes in, and then we'd do the complete streets treatment on this corridor. This next slide here, oops, let me get the right clicker. This kind of shows the cross-section that we, the kind of the tentative preliminary cross-section that we used to obtain the grant for this project. This is a grant-funded project. We got about $7.5 million of grant funding to be able to complete these improvements. So the initial concept here is to essentially have a multi-use path along the north side of the corridor that's 10 feet wide that would be used for both the bikes and the peds. And then the cars would be on the street only there, and we'd narrow the travel lanes a little bit to get the sidewalks a little bit wider there, so it'd be a little more comfortable to walk on either side of the corridor. And then we'd have the landscaping along the north side to separate the multi-use path from the drive lanes. And then timeline here, what we're looking at is we've got the IGA with CDOT for this project was executed back in May. And now we're at the point where we're ready to award this design contract to begin the design, final design for the construction. And we anticipate the design taking about a year, or a little over a year, and we'd start construction probably next spring or summer, and then it'd take about a year to build the improvements. So summer of 26 would be when all this would actually get constructed and be available for use. So then the budget here, as I mentioned, we've got $8.85 million is the total budget. About $7.5 million of that is a grant. So then the city's contributing the additional amount there to get to the 8.85. So we, with this design contract, we'd have about $7 million left for construction, which we think is adequate to build what we need to build for the entire corridor there. So we think we'll be okay with the construction funding once the design is complete. And with that, we recommend that City Council approve this professional services agreement so we can begin the design work for the Old Hamden Complete Streets project. And with that, I'll answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Member Nooncamp has the first question.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. We've been talking about this one for a long time. It's so exciting to be at this place, and so exciting that that street is so ready for this revitalization. I'm really thrilled to be here. A couple questions. Are we approving this design specifically? So the design phase will take about a year. Will it come back to us for final approval, or is this our one chance to weigh in on design itself?
So the way we're looking at it now, this is a concept. The concept we used to get the grant, we had to kind of show that it would fit in the corridor and we can make it, the bikes and peds could get through the rest. So this, at this point, it's a concept. Once we do have some more detailed design, the idea would be to come back probably in a study session to council and get some feedback on the different concepts that we're looking at and see what the preferred option would be. So yeah, this is certainly not the final design. It's just the initial concept that seemed to make the most sense to fit in that corridor. But the design work will kind of further refine that for us and let us know what is probably going to be the best. And we'll obviously get feedback to make the final decisions on the design.
That's really helpful. I appreciate the context. I'm in strong support of the project, and I'm very excited to see the multimodal go through and change that street and create really a historic corridor for the city. My flag, and I've raised this, I think every time we've ever talked about it, so I'll raise it again, is just the design to have one shared path. With our hospital district, talking to some of our cyclists in the city, concerned about people flying down that. And then we have folks on wheelchairs, we have folks coming in and out of two different hospitals. I just still question if it's the right design for the space, acknowledging that I know it's a very narrow corridor and it's very hard to kind of make the space work. At least in one of the mock-ups in the design, I at least saw striping, so they separated it into lanes, but most of the other mock-ups just have a 10 foot wide space without any lane definition. And especially if cyclists are potentially, if other streets, if the walk and wheel work is not done, they might favor Old Hampton, especially commuters who are going quite quickly and use it as a cut through. I just worry about the safety considerations. I know that one member from Craig was on one of the design working group previously, but I just want to make sure the two things is that we're really reaching out to the cyclist community around the safety of, is this the right corridor? And then two, that we've really had strong conversations with the hospital and our stakeholders there. I know Swedish is moving their emergency room to the back, but they still have entrances to their buildings on the front of the building or on the south side. So raising that and hope that that's a conversation that we continue to have.
That is correct. Yeah, we're going to have further outreach as we get into the final design and how that path can be shared and make sure we're understanding how it will most likely be used. Like you said, people in wheelchairs and stuff, we want to make sure that it's not a deterrent for people to want to share that path. And if we need to define it better, that is something we certainly need to, definitely some feedback we got from the project advisory committee on this design that we need to refine further with this contract now that we have FHU in place to help us to figure out what's the right solution and how do we make sure it's going to be comfortable for all users.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Member Russell?
Thank you. So in looking at this project, has there been a design for snow removal? I mean, there's no extra room in the streets or on the sidewalks to accommodate snow. And my opinion is there's high buildings on both sides. That street will see snow frozen from the time it falls until in the spring when it melts. And there's going to be safety issues on the sidewalks there. So are we looking at that as well?
So that is correct. That will most likely, this will require our snow removal plan to change a little bit. We do have a snow loader, it's called, where we can haul the snow away, similar to what we do on Broadway. And most likely we'll have to do that here because you're right, there's not really a lot of room to pile snow and we don't want to have it on the sidewalks. So more than likely we'll have to change the way we plow a little bit and have to haul some more snow away to be able to make the corridor function in the wintertime. So there will be some changes in most likely how we remove snow in the corridor. Especially because of the north face, like you say, too. We've tried to do more of that along Old Hamden all the way through there because all the tall buildings, as you said, the ice just forms very easily with those tall buildings. So we've tried to be a little more proactive in removing that snow so the ice doesn't form quite as bad and we don't have to remove it.
Okay, I appreciate that, but that may mean we're going to have to increase the number of employees and the cost for snow removal. Equipment as well. I don't think that, well, that's my opinion. I guess my biggest concern is we're going to get it done and it's not going to work. So.
Well, we do have the equipment to remove the snow. It's just a matter of dedicating a staff time to do it. And you're right, it will require a change in allocation of time to get it done. But the equipment's available. We just will need to be proactive in doing it. So it is certainly going to require a change in how we do snow removal in the corridor.
Okay, thank you.
City Manager Lewis, something you want to add?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question along the same lines as Member Russell. Right now, Hamden is pavement and concrete from building to the center of the street. The plans that I've seen for the Complete Streets project have some green strips, they have tree wells, and things that we don't have now where snow could go. Isn't that correct? So it seems like we're actually adding permeable surfaces to this design that would allow us to pile snow, similar to what we do here at City Center with, using those areas for snow accumulation.
So the area on the north side there, kind of to the right of the exhibit, that is a bit of a landscape strip we might be able to store in there, but there's going to be a lot of vegetation, so it'd be a little tricky to do that, but there could be a little storage, but yeah, as of now, it is very similar now. All those tall buildings on Old Hamden, we do end up having to haul that snow away and just push it out because it's not going to melt in that north face. If we don't remove it, it'll be there all winter, so we more than likely will have to extend that to this corridor a little bit more once we get this done.
Thank you.
Member Wright?
So we have I believe it's called the Emerson, a very high-rise apartment complex going in. Are they contributing to this because they're going to have a lot of people living there that will be using this corridor? So are they throwing in money to help with the walkability with this? Because it will be their residents that will be using this quite a bit. Have we talked to them on helping out with this? Because it will benefit them.
Yeah, so this is predominantly a grant-funded project from the Regional Council of Governments. We applied for the grant and received that, and the Emerson actually was a use by right project. It wasn't a PUD where we could do any kind of a trade-off for adding impact that we could maybe get some funding. So we didn't really have the opportunity with the Emerson to do anything like that. It's all, I think it's 90% is grant funded, and then the other 10 city funding. So it's the Emerson really couldn't. We weren't able to do any extraction there for anything on this.
And then, are there other areas that we're looking at? There's some parts of District 1 and I want to say Yale and Logan area. When I was walking in that area, if you needed a walker, a wheelchair, a cane, I myself had to walk in the street because you could not walk on the sidewalks. If you had any kind of disability at all, where currently, if you're walking Old Hampton, need a wheelchair or anything like that, you could get around. But in those parts of District 1, and just off the top of my head, the sidewalks are so ADA non-accessible what are the plans for those areas? And this may not be the appropriate time to ask, but I'm reading through this and I was just thinking, boy, it would be great for those areas where someone like myself had to walk in the street and there are not bike lanes where I could even walk, where you have a chance of somebody getting hit because the sidewalks are inaccessible. So is the city looking at addressing those areas where they're in much worse condition than Old Hampton is?
The Old Hampton was basically qualified for the grant funding, is why we were able to get that. There's certainly a lot of areas in the city where we've got that narrow sidewalk and the ramps that we have the ramp program each year where we're trying to get the ramps updated, but the sidewalk width is still less than ideal for a wheelchair. So that is a larger problem that the city will need to address at some point to figure out how you get all the sidewalks to the right width for a wheelchair. So there's certainly several areas around the city that are in that condition that at some point will need to be considered for improvements.
And then you may not know this, but is there a rating system for our sidewalks for, wheelchair, walker, cane, just ADA ability, that we are rating our sidewalks currently, that, okay, this area needs to be looked at and it's a higher priority than another?
So basically right now we go by the width of the sidewalk. I mean, you can tell if the sidewalk's too narrow for a wheelchair, that's how we kind of know it's out of ADA compliance. And there's quite a lot of that around the city. We haven't really prioritized any of that yet. We prioritized all the areas that have missing sidewalks. We know where there's no sidewalk at all that we need to get, and that's quite a lot of areas. And that's kind of what we started with, is at least get sidewalk everywhere, and then again, maybe go after the areas that the sidewalk's not quite wide enough, but at least it's there already. We're trying to, at this point anyway, that's kind of been the focus, to try to get missing sidewalks in and then tackle the problem of the narrow sidewalks that have been built over the years.
Yeah. Thank you, Member Wright. And we did have that conversation about a year or two ago about missing sidewalks and prioritizing some of those areas. So
right.
If we could find that information, it'd be good to get it to the new members of council. Member Prang and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, thank you. These are beautiful initial plans. I don't really have a question, but a request that if the design does come back to council during a study session to discuss, that there is consideration for safety for our blind or vision impaired residents that may end up using that multi-use initial idea if that stays in the plan. I just want to make sure that there's a plan for communication and outreach. I don't know that signage would help, because if you don't know that a sign's there to read it, to know that it's multi-use, but how are we going to keep those residents safe?
Right, so we do have a project advisory committee already formed for this project that does include some visually impaired people to give us some of that feedback and where they cross and how they access the sidewalk. So we have a pretty good cross-section of different types of users right now giving us feedback, and the intent is to reassemble that group as we get more defined plans and ideas to get a little more dialed into what exactly is going to work for everybody and what we can do to make it accessible for as many people as we can. So that's definitely a consideration moving forward.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Host. The question I have is, the slides mention that one of the aims of this design is to narrow the driving lanes. I see that's 11 feet, under 11 feet here, which still seems pretty wide for me. In this corridor, I would want to see cars going really, really slow. Yeah. And I'm wondering if we couldn't pick up a little more space to widen some more pedestrian and bike amenities if we would narrow those lanes even further, especially if you got 2-foot gutter. It still feels like a 13-foot wide lane from curb to center line. Mm-hmm. So is there any consideration of possibly narrowing those lanes even more? Is that possible through here?
Yeah, I think so. This is just a concept at this point.
Okay.
I think we'd need to look at the buses and stuff to make sure they would fit and the mirrors wouldn't stick out. I think the idea is, we make it so all different vehicles can fit down there. But you're right, the goal is to slow traffic down a little bit to make it feel a little more comfortable for bikes and pedestrians. So that is certainly something we can look at these dimensions and adjust them here and there. But it's certainly not a final design.
Yeah.
It's just more of this is what it could look like and how we could fit everything in to try to separate the bikes and peds from the cars.
And then I would also want to see potentially some traffic additional traffic calming measures through here. Are there, I guess we're still in the preliminary phase, but would that be considered in this process as chicanes, or I guess bulb outs wouldn't be appropriate if you got you don't have a parking lane or anything like that, but.
Right. Yeah, I think on this particular concept, it was more just the lane width to try to make
Okay.
it feel a little more narrow and slow down. You know, it's not a wide open racetrack anymore, but it's certainly something we can look at to make sure we meet the intention of it. Because you're right, the worst thing we can do is build all this and then the cars still fly through there. We certainly
Right.
wouldn't want that. So that's something we'll look at through the design process and make sure that, and FHU, the consultant we have, recently did something up on Colfax in Denver similar to this. So they've got some recent, I think some really good knowledge they're going to be able to share with us to help us to make some decisions on how we want our corridor to look.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Member Ward?
In reading through this, I see the scope of work is pretty significant. Can you elaborate a little bit on the overall scope of work? When I first saw this and I saw $1.8 million for, a deliverable set of plans, not having worked on a project like this in the past professionally or really on council, it's hard for me to know what that gets. But as I look through it, it's surveys, it's meetings, it's a bunch of things. Can you just kind of roll down the list real quick of?
So yeah, I think, initially it starts with the public outreach and getting the feedback on what everybody needs. And then as we dial that in, then we can figure out, here's maybe what we want and here's what we can get based on the width of the room we have. Because we don't have a lot of space to get additional right of way here. As you know, the hospital and the buildings are right up on the sidewalk. So we kind of have a limited width and we figure out what fits in there and what's the best use of that. And then we do go into the kind of the 30, 60, 90 design phase, they call it. You have a 30% design, kind of rough it in and make sure everything fits, and then you keep dialing it in. And so it does start out as kind of a general feedback gathering, and then they put the concepts down. We decide a concept, and they'll move towards final design, and that's really where the cost comes in. It's a pretty long corridor here. This is a pretty big corridor, and we're basically rebuilding the entire thing. We're basically, all the asphalt and concrete are coming up, and we're starting over basically with a whole new road. And it takes quite a lot of design effort to do something like that, to draw that many sheets and all the design and stuff to fit all the storm sewer inlets and everything in there. So it does take time to do that, and it is certainly a significant effort, and that's where a lot of the cost comes in, is the plans are going to be fairly substantial for this.
And we've talked about some other projects that may take place in that same area around the same time that this is being done. Like, as you mentioned, stormwater, potentially water mains, other things like that. Is this engineering firm expected to coordinate with those projects as well, so that we can?
Yeah, so we have the utility design is about 90% complete right now. We're just about done. So the real coordination is going to be the storm sewer inlets. If we move the corners with the ramps and stuff, we've got to be able to fit the curb and gutter into the inlets again. So we're trying to design the utility portion so we don't have to move those inlets any more than we have to, because they are going to change a little bit, in or out there depending on the width of the lane. So we are trying to make it to where it's not going to be a lot of redoing work, because we are going to have to do the utilities first and just get that out of the way. That's just part of the phasing to get that done, so then we can come in and focus on the road improvements. It's trying to do them at the same time is just very problematic, and it would be a lot of disruption to the hospital area that we probably wouldn't be able to phase too well. So there is coordination there for sure. With the utility design right now, we're thinking ahead already about, they've got these concept plans, the utility designers, we're trying to figure out how to match it in so we can coordinate. And the worst thing, I don't want to have to do work twice. You don't have to build something and then rip it up and move it. And we're trying to minimize as much of that as we can. And I think we've got it down to pretty minimal, that it shouldn't be too much to have to redo once we do the road improvements.
Well, whenever somebody talks about not doing the same work twice, it's music to my ears. So thanks for that. The other question I have is just more general. Based on the cost here, it looks like we're paying about 20% of the overall project cost just in design and engineering. Is that normal? It seems high.
It is these days. It is high. It used to be about 12 to 15%, but we're seeing about 20% anymore. It is just the way this grant funding works is we've got to follow the CDOT local agency process, which requires a tremendous amount of sheets and the stormwater sheets and all that. There's a lot of different sheets that CDOT requires that takes a lot of time, and that's part of the why when we went after this grant, we inflated the number high enough, we think, to be able to afford all those sheets, because it does chew up a lot of the budget to meet their standards. So we feel like we're pretty comfortable we can meet their standards and still have enough to actually build it, because that's the trap you get into. You do too much on the design, you can't build it, and we don't want to do that. That's the worst thing you can have. So we do feel like we've got enough, and that's part of this cost too, is having to make that plan set to the CDOT standard. It's pretty aggressive. There's a lot to do there, so it's going to take some effort, and so it's but we feel like there's still enough construction money left on this one that we can build what's designed.
Government giveth and the government taketh away, I suppose. Thank you very much.
All right, any further questions from council? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve 11C2?
I move to approve 11C2.
Thank you, Member Nunnenkamp. Could I get a second?
I second.
Thank you, Member Wright. Any further comments? Member Russell.
Thank you. I thank you for the presentation. The pictures look wonderful. And I know that things need to be done here, but there is no way that this is going to happen. And I have problems spending that amount of taxpayer money. It's grant money, but it still came from taxpayers. And there, on this one diagram on the design concepts, it shows on the north side that the sidewalk is going to be 5 feet, and then there is a park strip that's going to be 8 foot. That's 12-foot sidewalk and park strip area. On the other side, there's a 10-foot path with a 7.5-foot park strip. That's another 18 feet. And then it shows trees. I think there's going to be no trees along this corridor, period. And so I, in good conscience, cannot vote yes on this, and so I'll be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment in my support of this. This has been a long time coming. It seems like we've been talking about this for a couple of years. I'd love to see more multimodal oriented traffic calming type projects around the city. This is complete streets projects are a big spend, but finding smaller wins we can do elsewhere. I'm looking forward to that. But really excited to see this project come to fruition, and thank you to staff for all the work that's gone into it.
Thank you, Member Nunnenkamp.
Yeah, I also want to voice my support. This is something that for the last 2 years, as I have engaged with constituents in District 2, where this project is located, they have asked for action on Old Hampton. The cars are going too fast. The hospitals want it, the local businesses want it, the residents want it. And so this is a way for us to be responsive to citizen concerns. I'm thrilled that we're funding it with grant dollars. And I think that it's going to really help the community. And yeah, I mean, the devil's in the details. We have to now design it and make sure that it's going to serve the needs of the community. But the design group so far has been very engaged. And I think we're going to get something really great out of it. So it's on us to ensure that we do.
Thank you. And with that, can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Nunnenkamp.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Nay.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Member Wright.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes, 1 nay, the 1 nay being Member Russell.
Thank you. Deputy Director Tim Host, you're still up for the design contract award to HDR for the South Broadway Complete Streets.
All right, we're going to do a brief PowerPoint presentation on this one to kind of summarize the concept here, and then I'll answer any questions about this. So this is the South Broadway Complete Streets. This is the section of Broadway between 285 and Bellevue, and this is another grant project. We got this grant at the same time we got the one for Old Hampton. We applied for both of these at the same time. We were fortunately awarded both of them, so they're coming along about the same pace here. So Broadway here is a little bit of a different concept here on Broadway than Old Hampton here. What we've done is, once again, the purpose is to encourage pedestrian traffic and a little more bus use on Broadway. But Broadway is a big bus route, so the idea is to try to encourage people to use the buses more and improve the bus stops and then make them a little more friendly for people to want to get on and off the bus and then shop around in Englewood and stuff and be able to get out and move around. So the other part of this is for the bike lane portion, the concept here is the bike lane will be on Sherman Street rather than on Broadway, as Broadway's a little more higher traffic and higher speeds out there. So the idea is that we'd have the bike lane on Sherman and then have connections on each of the east-west streets to get back over to Broadway for people if they wanted to get on the bus or if they wanted to get over to Broadway, to get to a particular destination or something. But the reason the Sherman Street was chosen as the bike lane is because to the north there at 285, it ties right into the Little Dry Creek Trail. So if somebody's, riding their bike, they can get on that trail and go east or west, wherever they want to go through the city. So it really is a nice connection. It's more of a calmer route, I guess. You're not riding on Broadway. Sherman's a lot calmer. And the idea is to do some more traffic calming improvements on Sherman to make it even more comfortable for people to want to ride their bike over there and try to minimize the amount of bikes and cars conflicts on Broadway, just to reduce the risk of any conflict there. So essentially that's the concept on this. And then we do have a few a few little, like I said, the traffic calming things on Sherman would be it's a traffic circle, which is not really a roundabout. It's just more of a circle in the middle of some of the intersections just to kind of make people aware and slow them down a little bit as they're driving. So it's not quite as intimidating for the bikes to be out there with the cars. So that's and then we'd have the wayfinding signs on the east-west streets to get people back and forth to different destinations on Broadway as they need to. And the big part of this is that pedestrian lighting along Broadway. That's about $1 million of this work, is to add pedestrian lighting all the way through that section there. So it's even at night, it feels more inviting and friendly for pedestrians to get out and get around. Because right now, lighting is very inconsistent in that area at night. It's not the most welcoming lighting environment for pedestrians. So this would really basically take what's in the downtown area now and kind of expand that out to the South Broadway area to try to expand that to further use Broadway just outside of downtown as well. So the few of the concepts here, this is more the bulb outs and things like we talked. This one is still definitely in the preliminary stages. We haven't come up with any quite as firm as the Old Hamden concept yet, but there's certain different these bulb outs and the circles there that we see, and then the striped bike lanes and buffers and things. So that really is some work to do here still to identify where all this should go to make the most impact and have the best use for cyclists to feel more comfortable riding in the corridor. So then I guess as far as this one, a similar timeline to the Old Hamden one. As I said, we got the grant about the same time, and these two projects are running along about the same timeline. So this would be probably about a year's design, again, a little over a year design. We'd like to have it under construction next spring, summer, and then probably take about a year to build this one as well. It's not quite as extensive as Old Hamden. It's just more kind of modifying what's out there. The Old Hamden's pretty much a scrape off and start over, but this one's a little more of a enhancing what we've already got. So it may not take quite as long for the construction, but we still expect probably by summer 26 this would all be constructed. And then here's the budget on this one. Once again, it was a grant project. I think it's a little over $6 million or so is grant funding. So between this and the Old Hamden projects, it's about $14 million of grant funding we're receiving to do these two projects. So with this, we've got about $1.5 million for the design. Again, it's kind of ironic they're about the same cost for design for both, but we have about $6 million left for construction, and we feel that's adequate to build the improvements that are contemplated for this project here. And with that, we recommend the award of this contract. It's HDR as the consultant this time, was the selected consultant. They got some good experience with bus stops and things that we really felt they would have some good knowledge for us to be able to use to make the improvements we're looking for on Broadway to make it a little more of a complete street corridor for us. So with that, I'll answer any questions you have on this one.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Mayor Pro Tem, did you have the first question?
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Host. Excited to see this one come forward too. Couple of questions. Is there any plan in this to do improvements to curb and gutter, median, or any flat work along Broadway?
So it's for ADA access. There is that. It's not really any like remove replace. We've done a lot of the remove and replace for anything broken. So this is going to be mainly for getting to the bus stops. We're looking at any kind of ADA access to make sure people can get in and out to the bus stops and around Broadway. There's a few corners that need some work still to make them more ADA accessible.
Okay. Then the other question is that I believe right now there's no access on Sherman Street to get down to the Little Dry Creek Trail. Is that going to be added?
So I think if you go right there on what is that street there just south of 285, there's, I can't remember the name of the
That frontage
street.
road, whatever that thing
Yeah.
is, there
Oh,
is
yeah,
a
there-
turn in there.
There's
Yeah,
a turn
if
in
you-
on the.
yeah, if you go
Okay,
east,
so
then
on
you
the
go
south
down.
side there is access. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it ties right
Good.
in. It feeds in really nicely. Yeah, if somebody's riding on Sherman, it jumps right into the Little Dry Creek Trail there. So it's a nice connection to get
Okay.
all the way from Bellevue up to the trail if anybody's wanting to travel that way.
Great. Okay, that brings up one more question. There's no. Once you if you were gonna go straight up Sherman, I believe there's a bike lane on Sherman in Denver. But is there just gonna be a gap between Hampton and or is it maybe?
So yeah, I don't believe there's a bike lane on Sherman north of 285. I think the idea is to connect into the Little Dry Creek, and then I think I'd have to look at the map, but I think there are some connections to head north off the Little Dry Creek Trail on some different corridors there. I'd have to look at the connectivity, but there is a way to continue north if you want to.
Okay, thank you.
It's not a true neighborhood bikeway, but it is a bike route. So,
Okay.
Yeah. Member Russell.
Thank you. So are there any plans to make sure about safety around the school on Sherman Street. Because the school is probably between Stanford and Tufts on Sherman.
Right, so that is gonna be part of the traffic calming and the intermixing of the cars and the bikes and stuff to make sure that's considered, but you're right, the school is a little different, design concept and consideration for that certainly will be part of the design work.
Okay, and if they're making a traffic circle, also snow plowing will probably happen on that street also, since it would be a through street, correct? I mean, currently it is not.
So as what was that? The
Snow plowing.
Yeah, but it's.
So,
Yeah,
I mean, because not all streets in Englewood are plowed.
right.
But because it will be a through street for bicycles, I'm assuming it will be added to the streets that are snow plowed.
So yeah, at this point, I'm not sure we have a bike route snowplow. I'm not sure how much of the plan is in, but it certainly would be something we want to look at, because you're right, this is going to be the defined bike lane, and we want to make sure that's more than likely we just widen out the plowing to expose the bike lane. How we do now, we kind of, if there's a bike lane on the street, we'll typically push the snow out beyond the bike lane so it's accessible for bikes. There might be a little bit of snow on the shoulder, but the bike lane will be cleared so it can be used, and that would be the same with this.
Okay, thank you.
Member Noonan-Camp?
Thank you. I'm going to have a few questions. I apologize, we haven't seen this one in a minute and just need to bring myself up to speed. One is on the Sherman bike sections, the plan is to use sharrows, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. We wouldn't remove any parking on Sherman. It would just be more of a sharrow concept, yeah.
Okay, because I know that we have gotten quite a bit of feedback from citizens that they do not like the sharrows. Is this just essentially the best thing we can do right now with what we have?
Yeah, essentially, we just don't have, we'd have to take parking out. It's difficult to take parking out in front of residential properties. That's not nobody wants that, right? You don't want to not be able to park in front of your own home. So we do need to kind of share the space. So that's the idea with some of the bulb outs and the traffic circles and stuff, to try to slow down traffic with the sharrows to make it more comfortable. Because you're right, the feedback on the sharrows sometimes, you're really not in your own lane. You're just kind of sharing the lane with cars. So the idea is to be able to slow the cars down enough so people still feel comfortable with the sharrows to be able to get out there.
And with the bulb out and then into the traffic circle, how do cyclists navigate that? Are they going around, like into traffic around the bulb out to then keep going, or are they going over the crosswalk?
So typically they go around the bulb out is what we'd have them do. We wouldn't put an opening in the bulb out. It would typically be they'd go out into traffic and go through the circle like that. So it is, the sharrow concept is something we've got to refine a little bit here, I think, and make sure, because once again, we don't want to build it and then nobody rides their bike on Sherman. That'd be the worst thing, if nobody feels comfortable on Sherman. So that's going to be the critical part of this, is to make sure that the bike facility on Sherman is something people will want to use and feel comfortable using. And that's something we'll have to iron out with the design work and refine how that's going to look.
Okay, well, yeah, in the same way that we're doing, I would like us to do the outreach to the cyclist community for Old Hampton Complete Streets. I think here it's important too to make sure that we have the right path, that it's usable.
Yep.
And then the other question I had was on Broadway, we're doing all of these improvements to make it more pedestrian friendly, but if I'm reading this correctly, we're not doing actually any traffic calming on Broadway. We're only doing traffic calming on Sherman. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Have we considered traffic calming on South Broadway?
Not really, because it is intended to be more of a high volume, a little higher speed street. It's intended to move cars. So yeah, it's really not something we've considered there. And that's why we're thinking of getting the bikes off of Broadway, because it really isn't a good environment for bikes and cars there with the 4 lanes and the parking and all the intersections and access points. It's problematic. So yeah, and it'd be difficult to, I guess the traffic calming on Broadway is more the signals about every intersection. So it really is it's kind of controlled as best they can be, but it is more of a high volume, higher speed street that that's why we're trying to separate the bikes from that, just so people don't have to feel like they have to ride their bike down Broadway to get north-south. They have another route to take.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I understand, obviously, Broadway is a corridor for the metro, and we have some neighbors who obviously have a vested interest. But, in the 2 years I've been on this council, I've consistently heard around speed on Broadway is one of the biggest concerns from citizens south of 285. We've had crashes, we've had fatalities, we have had people come to us and say, it's a strode, it's not a street or a road, it's kind of this in between. And if we're doing all of these improvements to increase, pedestrian safety and access on Broadway, it seems like something we should consider. Are there traffic calming opportunities there beyond signals?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a valid point. I think that's something we can look at and look at the crash data and stuff and see what's happening there. And if there's things we can do, we certainly the goal is safety, right, and to prevent crashes and then issues like that. So it's certainly something we can look at to see if there's some, because we are doing some concrete work and things, if there's a way we can maybe make it safer, that's certainly something that can be considered for sure.
I would appreciate that being incorporated into the design considerations, and if we have grant money we can use for that, I think it'd be a good use of it. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Member Wright.
Thank you. Why was Sherman considered opposed to Acoma or Lincoln, something closer to Broadway, so that bicyclists could, easily access the businesses on Broadway?
So the reason Sherman was selected is because of the north-south access. It's a straight shot all the way down to the Little Dry Creek Trail. Lincoln's kind of broken up. You can't get all the way to the trail. You'd have to shoot over and get over. So Sherman is a nice straight shot from Bellevue all the way to Little Dry Creek, and you're not having to wander around quite as much. So that's why Sherman was chosen. It's just a direct connection to another regional trail there that you can get to. So that's why it was selected over Lincoln or Acoma or anything, because it does have that connectivity to the other trail.
Okay, and since we're looking at major thoroughfares, I'm going to ask Go West again. Are we looking at grants for improvements on Federal? I know it's a hodgepodge of cities again, but we have sidewalks and stuff, like I mentioned earlier in District 1, where the walkability and don't you dare bike on Federal because you won't make it through there. Are we working with our partner cities or looking at what could be done there? I know you have a lot on your plate, but are we looking at what could be done there also?
So Federal, there is a City and County of Denver has initiated a project to do the bus rapid transit on Federal north of Dartmouth. That's a project that's going on now. Englewood's portion didn't get included in that, but north of Dartmouth, they are looking at trying to encourage more bus use to try to get more cars off the road. But as far as the section in Englewood, we don't have anything active right now on that. That's certainly one of the corridors we're aware of, though, that does need some improvements similar to this, and that'd be something in the future, like you say, that we'd look at for future grant opportunities as we get time to do them. Once we can get through a few of these projects, that's certainly another priority for the future.
Member Prank.
Thank you. So given that parking is kind of a very passionate area of discussion within the city, I see that the language in here says that we will protect parking to the maximum extent possible. Could you talk to us a little bit about, in the initial design phase, where potential loss of parking spots would be, and are they dispersed along the length of the project or concentrated in any particular area?
So the only real loss of parking is going to be where those bulb outs go, where we got to stick those at the intersections. There might be a little bit on the corner properties, but otherwise the intent is to not take any parking away from in front of a residential property. That just doesn't work for anybody else. It's kind of against what everybody's used to having, So really just those bulb outs is the only place we might lose a little bit of parking on Sherman there, but otherwise the rest of it shouldn't be affected too much by the improvements.
Any further questions? See none, can I get a motion to approve 11C3?
I move to approve 11C3.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Prang. Any further comments? Seeing none, can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Nudenkamp.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Member Wright.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Deputy Director, thank you very much for your time and happy holidays. All right, and with that, we're now moving on to general discussion. Mayor's choice. Don't have much tonight. Actually, I do want to thank City Manager Lewis. I know that I talked about, one of the things that I like to do is be a little bit more intentional in terms of making this more walkable, and I've seen that staff has gone out and started painting some of the pedestrian walks on Broadway. I'd like to see that continue throughout the rest of the city, but I do like that they've already started that aspect of it. And so, I'm sure like in the future here in the next month or so that we'll get a little bit more detail in terms of what the plan is there. But love to focus on Broadway as well as anything around the schools in terms of getting those painted. So I thank you for that. And I think some of the bike lanes were also done as well. So thank you. Thank you. Since this is our last meeting of the year, just a special thank you to staff, all the departments. There's been a lot on the plate of departments. There's been a lot going on in the city. So for every department. You guys have done terrific work. I know that we haven't had the chance to really thank you personally, or we don't do it enough, but for all the departments, all the department heads, you guys have done amazing work this year, and I just want to thank you for that, and just hope that you guys enjoy the holidays. We'll be back at it on January 8th or whatever the date is, but thank you to everyone, and hopefully you have a happy holidays, happy new year. So see you at the start. So council member's choice. Anyone? Go ahead, member Wright.
I just needed to thank several of the department heads, City Attorney Niles, City Manager Lewis, Deputy City Head, yes, Dodd, Director Underhill. I'm forgetting so many people. I have taken multiple tours of different areas of the city. Chief Watson, all over the place. And I'm continuing to take different tours of different areas of the city, getting to know so many people and stuff. And everyone has been so wonderful and stuff. Doing a couple more this week. And then I think next week is a break, and then starting next year also. Getting to know a lot of things that I didn't. Everyone's been welcoming, answering questions. So special thanks to everyone that I've already toured with, and then everybody upcoming. So I just wanted to acknowledge them.
Thank you, member Wright. Member Noonekamp.
Just wanted to give a brief readout since the last meeting. The library board met last week, and they'll be coming to us in the new year for a study session on basically, the library has had a lot of challenges really since the pandemic with the closures and then the openings and then new security and new policies and new staff, and then a closing for contamination, all of the above. And so there's really a question around how does the library move forward? As we saw in a recent communication to council, we are not seeing the level of even like library card holders as maybe we would like to be seen in years previous. And so there's a question around how do we create a long-term vision and strategy for how the library moves forward and how it serves a 21st century population. And so they had that conversation with the library board and some of the options about how they can take the time and make the investment that they need into the strategic planning for the library and what is really the strategic plan for the library moving forward. So that conversation will continue to be developed through the library board meetings, and then we'll come to the council in the new year. But just wanted to give you guys a heads up about that.
Thank you, member Noonekamp. Anyone else? Member Ward.
Just want to give a shout out to the clerk's office and the folks in the passport acceptance office. Mrs. Ward submitted her passport application last week. It was a great experience. Went very smoothly. Awesome. So that one is a great get, and good work, staff.
Where are you guys going?
Going on a cruise in May.
Congrats. Member Russell.
Thank you. So I got a question from a constituent today about who is putting out the flyers for the neighborhood signs? Is the city doing that? And so I'll let you answer the question first.
Thank you, Member Russell. We got another question about that from a resident from Hampton Hills. We have had a couple of residents that have stepped forth to serve as neighborhood group leaders. That is not technically a registered neighborhood yet. They need to complete that process to be listed on our website and to officially be eligible for our grants for those neighborhood signs. But what those individuals have done is put together a newsletter. We have kind of a template that we give neighborhood group leaders that they can use to create a newsletter for the neighborhood. We did get some feedback on some changes that folks have requested that be included in that newsletter. So we'll pass that on to those group leaders. But it is a very much neighborhood-driven project. And what we require for those neighborhood sign-ins is that they really get the buy-in and input from the neighborhood. So we have a certain number of people that need to participate in the survey that is now active for those the residents of Hampden Hills to select their sign for the new neighborhood signs that go in at key intersections. And so that process is in place now, but we will be reaching out tomorrow to the neighborhood group leaders and others we've heard from in the neighborhood to just clarify any misunderstandings or miscommunication about the process.
Okay, so, and is it at taxpayer expense? Are those flyers created at taxpayers' expense or not necessarily, just the neighborhood group leader?
I'm not sure who prints those. They are, the content is solely by the folks who have stepped up to be a neighborhood group leader, but I'll need to check with neighborhood resources. The grants themselves are allocations that council has in the budget that go towards that signage. But I'll have to check with our neighborhood resources coordinator about who prints those. So I'll do that.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I want to thank staff for all the hard work this past year. And I just appreciate all of you. And I want to wish everyone a happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year. And I hope you all enjoy your break, and we will see you in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell, and City Manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I've just got a couple of things. Wanted to first report on some outstanding work in the Utilities Department. For those that I've had a one-on-one with since this information came out, this may be repetitious, but for the public in general, just want to let you know that the Utilities Department has really done some great work in bringing in new revenue for our water fund that's from outside of Englewood that will really help ease the burden on our residents and our ratepayers for water services. Back in 2021, Director Van Ryan, his team really went through all of our contracts for water sales. One of those was Centennial Water and Sanitation, which should not be confused with Centennial, the city. It's actually serves Highlands Ranch. So the Highlands Ranch water providers, Centennial Water and Sand, looked at that contract and realized that we have a provision there that allows us to reappraise our water resource in order to just make sure that we're maximizing the amount of money that we are charging them and receiving for that outside water sales. So Centennial challenged our actions back in 2021. We've been in court for 2 years. We just got our final sign off by the court that the 3 appraisals that we've had done now can be averaged. I believe it was average, or we took the middle appraisal. Regardless, we have now settled with Centennial and will receive a lump sum $2.1 million from Highlands Ranch water payers for their water service that we provide. And so that's for the back to 2021 when we first started this process. In addition, we'll be receiving $750,000 annually, until the next time that that's additional revenue on what we were already receiving, until the next time that we have the opportunity to reappraise, which interestingly is coming up, and we intend to exercise that option more aggressively. We have not exercised this option in many years, so good work there. Second, on Thursday, City Council will meet with State Representative Meg Froelich as well as State Senator Jeff Bridges. Thank you to each of you who have accepted that invitation. As we did last year, staff did reach out to council regarding topics you may want to cover. Staff has added to that list. So I just want to preview the topics and see if anyone has interest in presenting. Some of you have already given that feedback. First are the council requested topics. So we have construction defects legislation, which Mayor Sierra requested, and I assume Mayor, we're providing some talking points on that. Would you mind presenting that one during the meeting?
I guess I could talk to it.
Okay. And then secondly, we have affordable housing challenges, those ongoing one requested by Member Newnenkamp. And are you okay with presenting that. And then we also have 3 topics that have been requested by staff. One is some legislative requests. It's the same information that you all presented last year to our state reps, but continued legislative wishes that our police department and many leaders, police leaders across the state have asked for with regard to recruitment and wellness for police officers. Secondly, staff requested is lead reduction program funding. So Director Van Rye requested that, and we have those talking points. And the third one is a small business sustainability grant, which the state is considering, but we would like to get some of that funding that's requested by Coordinator Mel England. So in terms of the policing items, is there a council member who could volunteer to present those? Member Anderson, Mayor Pro Tem Anderson, thank you. Lead service reduction program funding. I have a taker for that one. Okay.
I could take that.
Mayor Sierra, and then small business sustainability grants. These are really, it's a partnership that we did with the Chamber of Commerce where we did a lunch and learn, I believe it was, and really have got a lot of great ideas from the business community about how to help them transition. For instance, they were, styrofoam is about to be banned, plastic bags. So we would like some state funding for grants for our business community on how to comply with some of these. So is there anybody who might? Remember Noonicam? Okay, great. If you have other topics, we'll be sending out tomorrow before noon some talking points. You can modify those to whatever you would like. And we'll, if you have other topics, just let me know. Finally, since this is our last meeting before New Year's, just want to remind everyone that city offices will be closed this Friday and the following Monday for the Christmas holiday, and then the following weekend, Friday and Monday for the New Year's holiday. Just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and happy holidays, and look forward to seeing you in the new year. Thank you, Mayor.
So much, City Manager Lewis. And with that, everyone, we are now adjourned. Everyone have a great holiday. See you guys in a couple weeks. Take care.